press anything funny for it?
I don't know. Idea. Yeah. Okay.
I
It's
think
on.
it's on.
Yeah. So, and then do you want a mic up when you shift here, or is that going to be awkward?
That'll be awkward, yeah. Yeah, I'm good with just a handheld.
Okay. So we'll leave that there. Okay, so that's off. Okay. And then when we come on, we'll switch that on.
Okay.
I'm leaving it off for now.
Uh-huh.
And I'll do the same. Do you care which side you're on?
No, I do not. Whatever side's your best side, I'm happy to take the other one.
No. You'll sit here because it's closer to where you're coming from.
That works.
What do you need from me?
I don't think so. I might want to fill this up with a little bit more water when I go up there.
You manage that exceptionally
Oh,
well. I'm not.
okay, thank you. Hello, look who's here.
Italia.
Good to see you again.
Past 2 days been?
A little busy. How about you? Not busy. Good. Really? It was so beautiful out. There was like sunshine, from what I understand. This is called sunshine here.
It's on, right? It is on.
It's on. I don't know. Do I have to like speak into it to amplify or no? Okay. Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me up there? Am I coming through? We shall see. Sure. I can't tell, yeah, how much you can hear it there. Can you hear it up top as well? How are we doing now? Am I still going loud? Do I need to amplify like this, or can you hear it like this? The first, okay. Okay, so I'll go loud and slow. Okay. Then I'll. Right. Uh-huh. It's a little hunched over, but it's okay. We'll make do. Mm-hmm. Ah.
There's a lot of people.
Okay. So go.
No, it's up to you.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
I can
Totally up to you.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of think it's good to let people. It's not often that we get this many people to the shul on a Wednesday night for no purpose. You're quite the draw.
Flatter. Flatter.
And I'll tell you.
Yeah, I'm happy to go up
that,
there.
okay, so
Make it also refill a little bit.
We are going to try to get started shortly. If everyone could come sit down, please, that would be great. If I could nudge people to please come down towards the front. We'd love to get as many people in the front as possible. So please come sit in the first 7 rows. 7. Everyone, please come sit down, preferably in one of the first 7 rows. And if you're in one of the last 7 rows, you should feel free to move into one of the first 7 rows. Okay. There's still plenty of space in the first row.
Get them before they sit down, or else it's too late.
That's right. Please come and sit in one of the first 7 rows if you can bring yourself to do that. Okay, is the foyer empty? Is everyone here? Okay, I'm not much of a public speaker, so I'm going to keep this very, very short so I can pass it along to Rabbi Ratner, who is a professional public speaker. So first off, I want to welcome all of you here. Thank you so much for coming out on this Wednesday evening. It's been a wonderful couple of days with Rabbi Ratner, and this is the big meeting where everyone together gets to interact with him, and we're really looking forward to that. And it's the end of 2 full days. So that's kind of thing one. Thing two, you all have a handout. If you don't have a handout, feel free to raise your hand and someone will get you a handout. Oh, we're making more. Okay. So if you could just keep your hand up for the next 10 minutes. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, you see I'm holding index cards. There were index cards at the entry. If you didn't get one, you can raise your hand now and someone will get you an index card. There's a hand over here. So these index cards are for questions that you would like us to consider asking Rabbi Ratner. We're doing a fireside chat format here. So after you're all able to hear from Rabbi Ratner for probably about between 20 and 30 minutes, we're going to sort of transition into a sort of Q&A where I will be asking Rabbi Ratner the questions as submitted by all of you. And so we have folks here who you can fill out index cards even as we're making our way through the program. And people will, members of the search committee will grab your questions and bring them up to me, and I'll be flipping through questions and asking questions of Rabbi Ratner. So hopefully most of your questions will be answered. Okay? So that's... Oh, I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm not a very good public speaker. I'm Robbie Cape. Bonnie and I are the co-chairs of the Rabbi Search Committee. Thank you for that. I will say that the only thing that the two of us will take full credit for is helping to put together an incredible search committee. And they really did all the work. Okay, so which brings me to the last item that I'm going to mention now, and I'm going to mention again at the end, so I'm kind of going to bookend this point. You all got a link to a survey. We would really love for you to fill out that survey, preferably before you go to bed tonight. If you rise very early in the morning, you can do it in the morning too, but the objective is to get the feedback as close to when you had the experience as possible. Generally speaking, feedback is best given warm, as it turns out. So please take the time either tonight or early tomorrow morning to submit that feedback. It's very, very important for us to have it. Okay, so almost right smack on time, I'm going to hand it over to the professional, and I'll see you back up here in about a half an hour.
So before I begin, first of all, can you hear me up top in the bleachers? Yes? Okay, great. If I could just request one more round of applause for Rabbi and Bonnie and the search committee who have spent an inordinate amount of time and effort over the last months to bring this process to fruition. So I'm incredibly grateful for all of your time and commitment, both of you and the committee as a whole. So I just want to make sure that we publicly express that. All right, it is a pleasure to be with you this evening, to learn a little bit with you, to study a little bit with you, and hopefully to get to know one another a little bit better when we get to the Q&A to follow. So tonight I want to share with you one of my favorite stories in rabbinic literature. You know, have it in front of you, but I'm going to give a little bit of an orientation before, so you don't need to follow along with it just yet. Although that being said, I know the nature of having passed this out before I started means you've already started to look at it, but that's okay. This passage comes from the Talmud, which, for those who don't know, is a record of rabbinic conversations and arguments that span across many centuries of the first millennia CE. The rabbis would often come together as a group to discuss, debate, and decide various questions about Jewish law, and also would spend considerable time addressing bigger picture questions, ideas about God, Israel, Torah, and the world at large. These rabbinic arguments often try to address one central question. What is the Torah asking of us today, and how do we live out those demands? The particular discussion I'll be sharing with you also presents what I'll call a meta-halachic question, which is, who gets to decide what the law is? In the Torah, legal authority and the transmission of law is clear. God tells Moses, and Moses tells the Israelites, and that's pretty much that. There's no ambiguity, there's no uncertainty about the transmission of law. God tells Moses, Moses tells the Israelites, end of story. After the Torah, legal authority and the transmission of law remains clear, although a little bit bifurcated. So the prophets receive God's message from the prophet Samuel through the prophet Malachi and share it with the Jewish people, even if the people and their leaders aren't always so receptive to hearing that message. At the same time, the Jewish people communicate with God through the priestly sacrificial system effectuated at the temple. This system functioned as a way of maintaining order in people's lives. The Jewish people could offer requests or thanks or seek forgiveness for any sins or transgressions, all through the sacrificial system, which ensured not only the clear expression of what they were asking for or what they needed, but also that God received whatever that message was through a process that was the process ordained by God through Moses. With the end of prophecy and the destruction of the Second Temple, how were Jews supposed to figure out God's intent for what Jewish law mandated in order to live a righteous and meaningful life? The Torah, after all, provides a big picture set of principles that a detailed, comprehensive program, rather than a detailed, comprehensive program of what to do and what not to do. So, for example, we are commanded in the Torah not to perform melacha, which is roughly translated as work, on Shabbat. But how do we know what melacha actually means? What constitutes work and what might not constitute work? And that's just for content that's actually included in the Torah set of mitzvot. Things get even murkier, even more obscure and complex when we get into subjects like prayer in the absence of a temple and a sacrificial system. So as the early rabbis tried to fashion a new post-temple form of Judaism, they struggled with how to determine answers to these fundamental questions. This struggle lies at the heart of the story we will be exploring tonight. Finally, before we dive into the text itself, I want to invite you to consider the broader literary context of the story. This is a story by the rabbis, about the rabbis, and for the rabbis. It's a story in which the rabbis reveal to one another their concerns, their hopes, and their priorities for the future. So let's dive into the story. This story, from a tractate of the Talmud called Bava Metzia, ostensibly is a debate about whether or not a particular type of oven is kosher. As we will see, one rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer, declares that the oven is kosher or pure, while the other rabbis debating him, collectively referred to as the sages, rule that it's impure. So let's dive into the story. It was taught elsewhere, if one cut an oven into sections and placed sand between each section, what is the ruling about whether or not the oven is fit for use? Rabbi Eliezer rules it pure, and the sages rule it impure. This is the oven of Achnai. All right, so again, we ostensibly begin with a very simple halachic Jewish legal question. Is this oven that we're talking about kosher or not kosher? One rabbi says it is. The other rabbis say it's not. Seems like a normal, straightforward legal conversation. But the next paragraph reveals something is a little off with the story. So what is Achnai? Said Rabbi Judah in the name of Samuel that they surrounded the oven with words of debate like an Achnai snake and declared it impure. So we get kind of like red flashing lights that there are larger issues looming just under the surface of this oven that we're going to be exploring. The notion that this discussion about whether an oven or not is kosher is really an oven that's full of dangerous and perilous snakes means that, again, we're gonna explore. There's a lot more underneath the story than just a question about kashrut. Okay, but now back to the story. So it was taught on that day, Rabbi Eliezer answered all the answers on earth, and they did not accept the validity of his opinions. So Rabbi Eliezer starts with a series of legal arguments about why the oven is kosher, and each one he levies, the sages reject. His argument goes nowhere with them. Sorry, my pagination's a little different from yours. Rabbi Eliezer said, if the law is like me, the carob tree will prove it. And the carob tree that was sitting right in front of them standing in front of them was uprooted from its place 100 cubits. Some say 400 cubits because we can't agree on mathematical numbers in the Talmud. The sages say, we do not bring proof from a carob tree. All right, so we've now left the realm of legal debate, and now we've gone into kind of a supernatural realm, almost miraculous, that Rabbi Eliezer says, if my argument is correct, then this tree will magically lift up off the ground and travel a distance of 100 or 400 cubits, and then, surprisingly to us, the readers, it does so. Like the carob tree actually goes flying around like apparently this bima can do sometimes with the right kind of air blowing through it. But then the sages say no. that doesn't do it for us. Okay, you might have invoked some supernatural or miraculous intervention in the natural state of gravity and tree growth, but that doesn't cut it for us. We're not impressed. Okay, so then the story continues. Rabbi Eliezer came back and said, "If the law is like me, the water channel will prove it." And the water channel nearby flowed in the reverse direction of its natural flow. The sages respond, "We do not bring proof from a water channel." So here we've kind of upped the ante a little bit. Okay, so maybe a tree can get uprooted if there's a strong windstorm. Maybe it wasn't really a miraculous intervention. But for a water to reverse its flow from one direction to another, that's clearly got to be supernatural. We have a dramatic, miraculous intervention in the world of affairs. But the sages, once again, are not impressed. They are nonplussed by this strange occurrence in which Rabbi Eliezer can change the direction of a water flow. So then we continue. Rabbi Eliezer came back and said, "If the law is as I say, the walls of the house of study will prove it." And the walls of the house of study, the Beit Midrash where they were studying, began to fall, cave in on themselves. Rabbi Joshua, one of the sages, protested at the walls, saying to them, "If scholars defeat each other in the law, how is that going to help you, study hall?" So the walls stop falling because of the honor of Rabbi Joshua, but they don't straighten back up because of the honor of Rabbi Eliezer, and still they incline and stand. So we get the Jewish Leaning Tower of Pisa emerges from this story. The walls, once again, Rabbi Eliezer is able to somehow miraculously call upon supernatural forces to make the walls start to cave in, but now we see he's not the only one with these amazing magical abilities. Rabbi Joshua, great name for a rabbi, also seems to possess the talent to either talk to walls or get them to fall or stop falling. So we seem to have almost this battle of rabbinic supernatural forces that arrive at a standstill. Okay, but we still haven't resolved the story, so we continue. Rabbi Eliezer came back and said, "If the law is like me, from the heavens they will prove it." And a heavenly voice came out and said, "What is with all you guys towards Rabbi Eliezer? For the law is like him in every instance." In other words, follow what Rabbi Eliezer is saying. Rabbi Joshua stood on his feet and said, "The Torah is not in heaven." So here we have the next stage. We're no longer relying on miraculous forces of nature to reveal themselves in strange or in some ways that shouldn't be the normal course of things. Instead, we have God's self, or at least a heavenly voice. Maybe it's God, maybe it's an angelic voice, but a voice from the heavens calling out, "Listen to Rabbi Eliezer. Stop fighting with him. Stop arguing with him. He is right. He is telling you what the right answer is. The oven is pure. The oven is kosher. Stop fighting with him." In response, the rabbis don't say, "Okay, we hear you. Voice calls out from the heavens. We listen to that voice. It's been fun, but now we're going with what Rabbi Eliezer says." No. Rabbi Joshua tells that voice, basically, it's not your business. It's our business. The Torah is not in heaven. The determination of law doesn't come from a heavenly source. So we'll continue on to understand a little bit more of what the Torah is not in heaven means. So in the next stanza, what does the Torah is not in heaven mean? Rabbi Jeremiah said, "Since the Torah was already given at Mount Sinai, we no longer pay attention to heavenly voices." Keep in mind that when the Ten Commandments were revealed, it was the voice of God uttering them to the people, to the Israelites at the mountain. But now, post that moment in time, we don't pay attention to a heavenly voice. Since you already wrote at Mount Sinai in the Torah, incline after the majority. Whatever the majority decides is how the law should be decided. So that's this explanation of what the Torah is not in heaven means. And now the punchline, the conclusion to this story. Rabbi Nathan met the prophet Elijah and said to him, "What did the Holy Bountiful One do in that hour?" So when God heard the response of Rabbi Joshua saying the Torah is not in heaven. How did God respond? Elijah said to Rabbi Nathan, God smiled and said, my children have defeated me. My children have defeated me. That's the end of that story. So, quite a story, huh? In smaller settings, I often will teach this text as a way to explore some complex questions about theology, about our Jewish notion of who and what God is and how we relate to God, especially in a modern context. If we had an hour of small group conversation together, I would go over this text in more detail with you and ask you some of the elements that occur in this story that at least emerge for me, such as why were some rabbis apparently capable of summoning miracles that interfered with the natural order of the world? Where does that come from? Why is that something that's considered to be legitimate as part of our tradition? It seems a little odd to me. Another question, why were the sages not convinced by such seemingly divine displays of power? Doesn't it maybe even border on heresy that they rejected the heavenly voice when the heavenly voice told them what to do, when they didn't believe in the miracles that were in front of them? After all, at least in the biblical tradition, we do believe in miracles. The whole Exodus story is premised on the 10 plagues and God's miraculous intervention into world affairs, and using Moses as a medium for parting the Red Sea. So how could the rabbis, the sages, have the audacity to reject what was in front of their very eyes? Why would God take delight in a decision that directly conflicts with God's preferred ruling? If God has spoken, God has said, follow Rabbi Eliezer, why is God then subsequently laughing and saying, my children have defeated me? I would think maybe God would want to be a bit more upset that they're not listening to him as opposed to supportive. So what does it mean that God is actually supporting that decision? And do we even want a God who can intervene directly, either through God's self or through rabbinic agents, intervene directly into the world and perform miracles for us? Or is that idea maybe a bit too juvenile and disempowering for how we want the world to actually function? Or what role is left for God in the world if humans are empowered to interpret God's message however we see fit? Some of the theological questions I often like to explore in a text like this. But I'll save these questions for hopefully, God willing, a future session or sessions with you where we can get into the theology. Because tonight I want to talk instead, for the remainder of my presentation, about one of the maybe less obvious, but actually I think really fundamental questions being asked by this story, which is, how do we balance between tradition or preservation and innovation or creativity when it comes to the unfolding narrative of Judaism? It turns out the dispute that I've discussed in this sugya, in this story, is not just a dispute between two random rabbinic figures. The two named protagonists, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus and Rabbi Yehoshua or Joshua ben Hananiah, are two of the greatest sages of the Talmud. These are some of the figures from amongst the avot of Pirkei Avot, the early rabbinic leaders that are held up with great esteem within our tradition. These two men together are actually the two rabbis who carried out Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, according to tradition, out of Jerusalem when the temple was being destroyed. According to legend, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai pretended he was dead to get past some of the zealots that were there. These two rabbis carried him out so that he could then meet with Vespasian, who was the general and then became the Roman emperor, and request the continued survival of Judaism through the formation of the first rabbinic academy at Yavne. Together, these two rabbis with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would be the ones who would teach and inspire the next generation, including their student, Rabbi Akiva. So these are two giants, two Gedolim in the rabbinic canon. And more than that, they actually represent and embody two different strands of thought about what the future of Judaism should be in a moment when the temple's been destroyed, when prophecy is no longer available, when the sacrificial system is gone, and the Jews had no idea what was going to be of Judaism, if anything. This was the moment of formation of Judaism 2.0, and they represented two contrasting approaches for what Judaism might look like. Rabbi Eliezer, who rules that the oven of Achnai is ritually pure, he represents the notion of tradition as it was meant to be back in the day. So Rabbi Eliezer is a traditionalist through and through. He represents a model of religious life in which the preservation of the traditions of the past is the priority, in which memory and what he learned from his teacher and his teacher's teachers is the most important thing, not innovation. We're in a moment of crisis, and so we need to sort of batten down the hatches and remember what was and preserve what was at all costs. That's his MO, that's his modus operandi. If he didn't know the answer to a question, he wouldn't answer it. And when he answered a question, he reported only that which he had learned from his teachers. For Rabbi Eliezer, Judaism is all about the passing on of tradition. In our story, he presents that tradition and brings support for his position in the form of miracles and the explicit approval of God. Look, he says, this tradition that I bring reflects that which God wants, that which God taught, passed down through generations. It's what Judaism has been, and it's what we should continue to make it so. Rabbi Joshua represents an independent intellectual tradition, a tradition of chidush, of innovation. Not only the Torah that was passed down from generation to generation, but the possibility of finding new traditions, new ideas, new meanings. In fact, in the ultimate of subversions, Joshua quotes words of Torah, words of tradition, when he says, Lo b'shamayim hi. But what he does in doing so is sort of emblematic of who he is, because he actually takes a quote from a passage in Deuteronomy and completely recontextualizes it. In Deuteronomy, the Lo b'shamayim hi, it's not in heaven, quote, actually constitutes a Rabbi Eliezer type of admonition, that mitzvah is not so far away. It's not in the heavens that you can't access it. It's what's available in your heart, in your mouth. Just keep what already is. You don't have to invent it. You don't have to create something new. Torah is already accessible because we already have it. And Rabbi Joshua takes that notion from the Torah and flips it to mean something entirely different. He flips it to mean that after Mount Sinai, the work of understanding, of knowing what we should do, is lo b'shamayim hi. That exercise no longer belongs to the heavens, but is now in the domain of the human intellect. And thus it is no longer a matter of keeping or not keeping a divine command that we've inherited, but an opportunity for human innovation. So when he says lo b'shamayim hi, it's an invitation for us to take our faculties of reason, of knowledge, apply them in a brand new way to a new context, and create a new Judaism that reflects that combination of received tradition and innovation. In the end of the story, this transformation is given the divine seal of approval when God laughs and declares, "My children have defeated me." So the takeaway of the story, bless you, seems to be the victory of one form of rabbinic exercise over another. The victory of innovation over tradition, of chidush over Masorah, and it comes at this fundamental time and layer of Jewish life. When God laughs and says, "My children have defeated me," that seems to indicate support for innovation over tradition, God's imprimatur for prioritizing innovation instead of tradition. But, like all things in Judaism, the story is not quite so straightforward. How can the validity of new ideas be judged? Who gets to innovate? What are the limits of innovation? What is the status of tradition? The balance between tradition, and innovation. This is the continuing battleground of Jewish life that our story doesn't really resolve for us. And the story itself, as radical as it definitely is, knows that this is not so straightforward. Perhaps even predicts that conflict is going to inevitably follow from this tension between tradition and innovation. Because it turns out the story that I shared with you today is not actually the end of the story, the end of the sugya. In the Talmud, the story actually continues, even though most lessons about the story end where I ended it. The story actually continues in a really harmful, painful way. Because what happens is that after this, the majority treat Rabbi Eliezer shamefully. They cause him to feel hurt and embarrassed. They reject all of his teachings about what's kosher or not kosher. They even go so far as to excommunicate him. They send him away. And according to the story, this then brings about terrible, calamitous damage when Rabbi Eliezer cries tears because he feels so hurt, and the tears destroy the crops. They destroy the agricultural infrastructure. He gets so upset that his wife, who is actually the sister of one of the other great rabbis, has to keep watch on him to prevent him from ever praying, because there's a fear if he's ever left to his own devices. And he prays the fervor that he has from this pain, from this embarrassment of being vilified and kicked out for his views, will cause even more destruction. And the story goes on that one time she left the house because she thought, too complicated to get into. Anyway, she leaves the house. He's left alone. He cries he prays and cries for a minute. And in that minute, he winds up killing her brother, the other great rabbi, Rabban Gamliel, because his pain was so overwhelming. So this small dispute about whether a specific oven is or is not kosher runs out of control. It leads to death and suffering all over this small point of Jewish law. So I think the actual takeaway that I'd like to share with you is a bit more nuanced. In the tension between received tradition and intellectual innovation, it's true that the story does privilege the latter. The message of the story is unequivocally that our models change and that we must be willing to experiment and try new things if Judaism is going to evolve. And we shouldn't hold ourselves back by those who represent retrieved tradition, old ways of doing, and old ways of being, because there's an importance to innovation if we want to keep our Judaism fresh and resonant. And there are times when we need to privilege tradition over innovation. Innovation doesn't get a veto over all decision making. There are times when we need to understand why the tradition matters and why perhaps it's not yet time for innovation or for full-fledged innovation. Preservation and innovation are inherently in tension. This is true of our Judaism and our institutions. It's one of the things that I had the pleasure of exploring with the ritual committee just a short while ago, when we try to figure out what we want to do when it comes to, and we'll have hopefully some time for this in the Q&A, about various issues, about traditions that many people feel are hallowed and inviolable, and yet others see a need to innovate to, for example, make a younger generation feel more connected to their Judaism. How do we reconcile those two in a way that is constructive, that doesn't lead to the destructive cascade that ultimately happens in the story that I shared? And that's why I think the story continues with the reminder it did, that wherever we are in the innovation versus tradition spectrum, what really defines us is not where we end up, not what ultimate policy decision we make one way or the other way, but the way in which we treat and speak to one another in the face of that tension. the way we hold each other in community and don't sacrifice the importance of community when it comes to making decisions that we hope will be in the best interest of the future. That what matters most is the relationships we have and the relationships we build with one another, and the sense of community and solidarity that we can create within our spiritual home, so that we can hold each other through these inexorable challenges of the debate between tradition and innovation. So I'm going to pause there and look forward to the conversation that we're going to have together.
Wow, the time is right on the money. Okay. That was a perfect place to end and transition to this dialogue. By the way, people can write questions about anything, questions you would have in general asked the rabbi. I'm not guaranteeing that I'm going to ask all the questions, so I'm likely not even going to be able to read all the questions, but I promise that I will do my best. That ending was wonderful because it echoed something that we heard in every one of the listening sessions that we did with the congregation, where the thread that was woven through each of those discussions was this desire for a spiritual leader who would lead us as a community and bring us together with joy, even in challenging situations. And so that was a wonderful way to end. So mostly to give me a little bit of time to read through this pile, I'm going to throw out some questions that we've heard many, many times over the last couple of days, but I recognize that that there were people in the rooms who were not necessarily here tonight, so I'm going to guess that a version of these two questions are going to be interesting to everyone. So and they're fairly canonical.
I want you to talk closer to the mic.
Oh, can everyone hear me now? Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. I've never been accused of not being loud enough. So, first question. What made you decide to be a rabbi?
Sure. Okay. So it's a good thing you'll have some time now. So it's interesting. When I was in rabbinical school, I learned that I had many peers who seemingly planned to be a rabbi from birth. I was not among them. So I grew up in San Diego in a warm, comfortable, conservative Jewish environment. We belonged to a conservative Jewish synagogue. I went to a conservative day school, K through 6. And then an Orthodox one, 7th and 8th. Participated somewhat in Jewish youth groups and summer camps. So my Jewish identity was always something that felt very comfortable to me, but never something that I thought would become a career, a vocation, a calling. So I set off for college not exactly knowing what I wanted to do. Except that I wanted to leave San Diego for a little bit and explore some of the world. So I set forth for New York on a whim of knowing that New York would be a bigger, more vibrant environment than I was used to. I didn't quite know how big or vibrant that would be. Wound up accidentally becoming a comparative religion major, studying pretty much everything but Western religions. So I enjoyed the learning about different worldviews, different perspectives that I saw sort of anthropologically and sociologically through different religious traditions and found it intellectually interesting, but still didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life, except that with all apologies to any of the doctors in the room, I knew I didn't want anything to do with blood, and with apologies to anyone who's in the finance field, I knew I didn't like math enough to explore anything that was financial, so I sort of by default thought I liked watching LA Law and Order, so why don't I try this law thing out? So I planned to become a lawyer, but I took a year off before starting law school. And in the year off, I spent most of the time studying at a place in Israel called the Pardes Institute. It's, for those who haven't heard of it, it's an egalitarian, traditional yeshiva amalgamation. It's hard to describe, but it's a place where you go and study Jewish texts from a sort of traditional yeshiva perspective, but it's fully egalitarian. Men and women study together. There's no sort of limitations or restrictions on observance level or knowledge or anything. And I found something magical and really transformative in the time I spent there. There was something that I felt just kind of come alive inside of me about living and breathing Judaism 24/7, from studying it to practicing it to being in Israel. And so I just felt alive in a way that I hadn't before. I didn't really know what to do with that. I hoped that I would come back to the States and become a lawyer and somehow find a way to continue nourishing this nascent Jewish yearning. So I went back to New York, went to law school, and became a lawyer, and tried to practice law for a few years, and sort of had my Jewish life on Shabbat and the holidays, and my law life all the rest of the time, and tried to balance between the two. And I found increasingly that it just felt impossible for me to do so, that I was constantly missing the time I wanted to spend and allocate to growing Jewishly, and the law practice that I did just didn't feel fulfilling. And so I kind of grappled with that for a period of time. And after about 3 or 4 years, I realized that I didn't want to live in that tension any longer. I had started to meet some rabbis who were doing interesting and novel things within Jewish communal life, not just working in synagogues or in day schools, but also working in Hillels and working for Jewish nonprofits, and kind of opened my eyes to the idea that becoming a rabbi was something that wasn't just unidirectional, but might actually have lots of different ways in which I could engage with my myriad interests and do it through a rabbinic lens. And so after a long period of discernment and our sort of family life situation getting to the point where it was a point where a transition was possible, I decided to take the plunge and switch gears and go to rabbinical school, and I've been very, very happy as a rabbi ever since.
Thankfully, I didn't have to listen to your answer on that one because I've heard it a few times. This job that I took on is really hard. So you'll have to forgive me. Let's start with an easy one. I think in almost every conversation we've had, there's been a discussion about musical instruments. And also a discussion about location.
Of services.
Location of services. So maybe talk a little bit about that. There have been a few questions about that here.
Sure.
Okay. So the question is related to the use of instruments during services, either Friday night or Saturday, and also about where we hold services. Do services always have to be here in the main sanctuary? Can we hold services in other locations?
So I'll tackle the second one first, because I think that's perhaps a little bit easier. I believe that, although the answer to this sort of dovetails a little bit to the other question too, I believe in doing whatever we can to maximize the spiritual impact of our services. One way in which I think we can do so is by taking advantage of the incredible beauty and atmosphere that you have down at the waterfront in the summertime, or whenever weather permits, which some people suggest is even more than summertime. It hasn't rained in 2 days, so maybe the new trends are coming. I don't know. I think that for Friday night service, for Kabbalat Shabbat service, if there's any service ever in which bringing in nature and bringing in aesthetics into the atmosphere of the service matters, it's Kabbalat Shabbat. For those who don't know, the service itself was created as an outdoor venue by the Kabbalists in Tzfat as a way to bring in Shabbat. So from its inception, it was meant to be something that takes place where you can feel nature, where you can feel the transition, the rhythm of day to night. And when one is blessed with an incredible venue like you have here, I would love to explore with the ritual committee, with others, if I was to come here, the possibility of expanding the opportunities we have to do outdoor service for Friday night, which apparently here in the summer I understand is Friday day still because the sun doesn't go down. Yes. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity. Where the synagogue I'm at now in Connecticut, we actually do Friday night services from Memorial Day to Labor Day every single Friday at the beach. We have a nice venue that we reserve with the local Parks and Rec people, and our attendance goes up about fivefold from what it is the rest of the year because people, not surprisingly, like going to Shabbat services at the beach. And there's a lot to say for that atmosphere. So big fan of exploring a venue on Friday night that we could access more routinely. When it comes to instruments in Shabbat, so again, my sort of animating focus is what can we do to make the Shabbat services, and all services, but for this point I'm focusing on Shabbat, as meaningful, as impactful, as spiritually engaging as possible. I find from my experience that using instruments in a tasteful, thoughtful way can add a measure of a spirituality to certain aspects of services that not having instruments might not be able to effectuate. There are other times where I think having an instrument might get in the way of a rhythm of a service. So I think it's important. So I am a proponent of expanding the use of instruments if and when it's done in a way that can enhance, again, the atmosphere of what tefillah is supposed to evoke. It's something that I know is somewhat fraught in this community, so it's something that I would want to explore, like I would want to explore any ritual changes in collaboration with the ritual committee and with the cantor for sure, and with other stakeholders in the community, so it doesn't feel like it's a decision that I or anyone else is imposing from on high, but it's something that we talk through and think through and try to reach as much of a consensus as possible on before moving forward. So that's a little bit about that answer. It's a complicated issue and there's more I could share.
Thank you. There are many cards here that ask about your relationship with Israel. And how you communicate that from the pulpit. I want to urge everyone, because we're not going to be able to get into this in nearly the amount of detail that the topic would deserve. I urge everyone, please, 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 if you really want to gain insight into Rabbi Ratner's perspective on this complicated question. I mean, for a lot of us, it's not a complicated question. But there is diversity within the community, which makes it complicated. And so I urge everyone to please watch or read Rabbi Ratner's sermon from Yom Kippur 2024. It will give you almost everything that I think you want to know about how Rabbi Ratner has navigated this very, very challenging period that we Jewish people find ourselves in right now. Okay? That being said, there's one question here that I think is even independent of October 7th, which is, how do you instill a love of Israel for all ages?
Great question, and yes, thank you for referencing that sermon, because I agree with you. It's both when it comes to the topic of Israel, it's both a simple and also an incredibly complex answer. And so I tried to articulate as best I could over the course of a much more extended sermon a lot of my beliefs and hopes and aspirations for what a relationship with Israel, and from my vantage point, ought to be in that sermon. So yes, I hope you'll have a chance to check that out. I love the way that the question was framed, because the answer I was going to give, if you asked what are my views about Israel, would be to try to teach and effectuate a love of Israel from young ages from birth to all ages. To me, having a relationship with Israel and having a love for Israel is inseparable from my understanding of Judaism. And it's something that I would want to instill. We don't have a preschool here, but so from the earliest ages of religious school, teaching them not only to love Israel, but reasons for wanting to love Israel, expressing some of the wonderful things that Israel does and has been able to do. And then as they get older, trying to impart how miraculous it is that we actually have a state of Israel, how this notion of Zion, Yerushalayim, of a homeland in our ancestral homeland, has been something that our people have yearned for 2,000 years and never thought was possible. And how the fact that we are blessed to live in a time when having a Jewish homeland in Israel is not only possible, but the reality is something that we should celebrate and cherish. And again, trying to articulate a positive, constructive sense of pride in having Israel, as opposed to what I feel is all too often a defensive approach or posture when it comes to Israel. There's so much that we can be proud of. There's so much that we can celebrate, regardless of how one feels about particular political leadership at any particular time in Israel. I believe there's a difference between loving Israel and expressing an opinion on any political policy piece of what Israel may or may not be doing in any one given moment. So I think it's important to kind of make those distinctions and find ways that we can collectively celebrate Israel, having festive Yom HaAtzmaut celebrations here, having one thing that we've done a lot of in my synagogue over the last year and a half is holding public vigils, holding times to pull people together at important moments in the course of the war and the hostage crisis, so that we have a sense of solidarity and connection. Again, I think there's so much that can unite us around Israel that I want to make sure that we're celebrating and championing that as much as possible.
Thank you. So I'm going to stick on this theme of love for a few questions, as it turns out.
As long as it's okay with Bonnie.
As I mentioned earlier, there was a thread through all our listening sessions around love, love at the synagogue, love for the synagogue, love with the synagogue, love, a feeling of love once you're here, which you talked about a little bit, but there's a few questions in the deck here about how to get that. Well, so one piece of it is how you foster that love here at the shul and amongst the congregation, for the congregation, but also how you spread the love and therefore attract new people or maybe existing people who have missed the love. How you put your arms, how we put our arms around those people and share that love with them.
So there's a lot I could say there. I'll share two thoughts. One to sort of the former part of the questions, one to the latter one. I've been really struck in the conversations I've had here over the last couple of days with how many members are intergenerational members here. How many are second or even third generation members of the synagogue. And one thing that I think could be really powerful, I don't know if you've done this already or not, but to collect some testimonials, intergenerational testimonials about what it is that those who have remained a connection to the synagogue for so long, what draws you in, what continues to animate you, and to record that and share that with one another. You have all these great video displays outside. I'm a little tired of seeing my face going across them, so I think you're ripe for opportunities to add to that content. So it'd be great to share those with one another. Have them on videos here. Have them go out in your weekly e-news or other ways in which you share communication. So I think there's something really, really powerful about the opportunity to share those stories with one another, because maybe not everyone knows how much of that is. That it's also, I think, a rather unique thing. Many synagogues can't speak to that level of intergenerational continuity. So I think that's a great way to share some of that love with one another. Insofar as making sure that both those who might become members or those who are members but a little bit disconnected try to feel a bit more of that love, I think it's important that there's a real intentionality to greet and embrace anyone who walks in this building for whatever reason. To have greeters at the door, not only on Shabbat, which I understand you do, but whenever there's a program, and to walk into a door of a place that perhaps someone feels a little bit of trepidation because they don't feel so at home yet, and be greeted by warmth and be greeted by a sense of welcome. It means so much to people. We're all in this world now where everyone has to choose where and to what extent they want to spend their time here or in any of the other numerous things trying to attract us both in real life and digitally. And so we don't get that many chances to make second impressions. So I think it's really important that whenever someone walks in the building, whenever someone calls to inquire about membership, or you just learn from word of mouth that someone new has moved to town and might be a potential member, any opportunity you have to show that individual that you care about them as individuals, both from their presence walking in or from an extra phone call, an extra touch point, to show that you care about them, I think really means a lot. And is a way that you can transmit some of the love that you were speaking to, but that people that you hold for this place, to bring in a more expansive universe of potential lovers of Herzl.
So we're going to continue on this on this kind of thread. Our religious school is seeing just incredible enrollment, and the session that you did, the several sessions you did with FRS children, and then sitting around the table talking to so many of those kids, it was wonderful to see. How do we? There were a few questions in here about how we bring those young parents in, how we build an environment that is welcoming for them and is comfortable for them and attract even more young members like them.
That's a great question. One thing that I know works well from personal experience, and that you might want to try to amplify here, because it's a little bit different from what the current practice is nothing makes a parent, I say this as both a parent and a rabbi who's watched other parents, nothing makes a parent feel more connected to a synagogue than watching one's children being up on the bima, helping to lead a service. And one thing that we do at our synagogue is have each and every class at the religious school take a Friday night in the fall and a Friday night in the spring that is their class-designated Shabbat, and they lead a portion of the service. And not only are they present, but their parents are present, their grandparents are often present, aunts and uncles show up. And there's such a beautiful reinforcement of the notion of the children and their families being part of the infrastructure of the synagogue community as a whole, and not just religious school students who are here to be taught and educated through their bar mitzvahs and then see you later. Nothing says that more loudly, I think, than when they're brought into the fabric, the rhythms of the essential spiritual components of a synagogue. So I would love to see that's something that you, thank you, that you perhaps embrace as just it's a simple way to build those bonds of connection. So when parents can see themselves and their families in a more expansive way beyond just the religious school context, I think it makes them see a long-term future with the community, with the congregation.
I'm going to continue on this love piece. So on Shabbat morning, I'm going a little bit out on a limb here. I'm probably getting it wrong. On Shabbat morning, we bless ourselves. On Friday night, we bless our children. We bless the state of Israel. We've talked about Israel, and we also bless our country. There's a question here about, well, the first part of the question is whether you address the political divide that exists in the country and certainly also at our shul. So that's kind of a binary question, and then it goes on to ask about, if you do, how. And then there's an extension of the question related to how you incorporate current events, which I think is a further extension of the political divide these days, given that it seems like every current event seems to have to do with politics. So sort of the position, or how you feel about bringing that to your pulpit in these very complicated times.
Sure. It's interesting. I thought you were going in a slightly different direction. I thought you were going to ask me if we do a prayer for the country in our services, which we do. I think we certainly need many prayers for our country and our country's well-being. So Yeah, it's a question that I enjoy because it's so complicated. I believe that let's start with this. I believe that a rabbi should talk about issues that might be considered political from time to time from the Bima, because the thing in there, the Torah, is a political document. You cannot read the Torah and not find very strong, assertive, moral, and political arguments about a whole host of issues. Whether you're talking about the environment, whether you're talking about how we treat one another, how we treat our animals, laws of war, how we treat the refugees and immigrants and strangers. It's all in there. That being said, my perspective when it comes to politics and sermons in the Bima is that I never want to approach an issue from a partisan perspective. I don't think it's appropriate because there are so many divisions we have in society, and I'm sure divisions here in terms of partisan political perspectives, that I don't think it's constructive to be divisive in giving a sermon. It's not how I feel comfortable. It risks our 501c3 status. So there's a whole host of reasons why I don't want to get into partisan argumentation. My orientation is I always start every week by reading through the Parsha with sort of a fresh set of eyes, seeing what emerges to me from that perspective, thinking about what's happening in society. And it might be that it's a Parsha that lends itself to some political issue that's going on in the world. And if so, and I feel like it's salient, then that might be the direction I go. But the direction I go it doesn't sort of end with a policy prescription of this side is right and this side is wrong and therefore vote this way. It's more, here's what our tradition has to say about this issue. Here's why it matters from a Jewish lens. Here's how you might want to think about how this traditional issue might be relevant in light of this current situation, and let's talk about it. So that's kind of my orientation when it comes to political versus partisan issues. I think it's important that we and I don't try to find a political issue each and every week to talk about, even though it seems like that's all that happens in the media these days. Again, I'm animated by what comes to me when I'm reflecting on the Parsha, what's happening in society, and if it happens to be one that intersects with something that's a bit of a political issue, then I go there. If it happens to be something totally different, then I kind of go in that direction as well.
Thank you. We often spend a lot of our time talking about innovation and future and change and the challenge of change. But there are a couple of questions here. And we have, I think one of the very exciting things about HNT is how diverse our congregation is. There's a question here about what, as the rabbi, what you can do to put your arms around those members who are more traditional and who are more observant, who are excited about continuing their traditions or even taking, adding new traditions to the set, new observances to the set of observances that we have institutionalized. There's questions here about adding more additional services, Suda, Shlishi, other things that we can do for those folks.
So I think kind of my general response to that question is sort of going back to the lesson I ended with in terms of the story of the oven of Achnai, that whatever decision we make as a community about any ritual issue, whether it's more traditional or more innovative, I think it's important that we make sure that in the process of making that determination, we still do our best to try to hold those members who might personally feel a little bit different from whatever that outcome is. That what matters is that we engage one another with respect and empathy, and understand that when there is a change in any direction, those who prefer not to see that change are going to feel a little left out, maybe even hurt, and to acknowledge that and reach out to people and not sort of sweep that change under the rug for the impact it has on them. I think one way in which I try to make sure that sort of in my current synagogue, that I continue to hold those who perhaps skew a bit more on the traditional side and less on the innovative side, is by making sure that I can be present for that cohort in places in which we have opportunities to be engaged more directly. So showing up to morning minyan when I'm able to is one way in which I think it's safe to say, not letting the cat out of the bag here, that those who come to morning minyan tend to be on the more traditional side. So showing up and supporting that minyan when I'm able to is a way of expressing my solidarity with that micro community of the overall community as well, and maybe featuring a bit more traditional opportunities for the holidays, for the Chagim, where again you're not going to get so many of the drivers of innovation. It tends to be a bit more of a traditional crowd. So being present in that moments and supporting those members who are there then, and maybe seeing ways in which we could add more features at a time when it's going to be predominantly folks who are aligned in that way, is a way in which I try to make sure that I'm interacting with them and supporting them and holding them. So that's one opportunity that's there. And then I think, I think it's a balancing act, right, between those who want to see a bit more innovation, those who are not yet participating in so much in services, but might be open to it if certain changes or innovations are made, and wanting to make sure that we're still resonant for those who have a more traditional orientation.
Thank you. Sort of on that, in that same vein, and there is no right or wrong answer to this next question, okay? And in fact, the way it was posed on this card really reflects that point. How do you model your Jewish observance? The question actually referred to some specific items, but I'm gonna, maybe I'll just mention it. So they mention being Shomer Shabbat, kashrut. I'm sure there's other elements in that list, but really it's just a question around your modeling for yourself, your family, and in your role for the congregation and the community.
When I was in rabbinical school, the synagogue that I generally davened at, it's actually oddly the synagogue that I'm currently the rabbi of, was a synagogue where an older rabbi named Jack Bloom was the rabbi once upon a time, and he actually switched gears and became a psychologist. And he wrote a famous book called something like "The Rabbi as Religious Exemplar," and it's all about this tension and the rabbi can often feel of being on the pedestal of what the ideal Jewish ritual halachic practice ought to be, and how very few in the congregation are as observant as the rabbi is, and the rabbi is sort of on display. Some sort of thinking of him, and maybe I'll share this in his memory, because he was someone I had the chance to really interact with a lot when I was in seminary. I think it's important for myself, both in terms of just my own personal integrity and knowing that I am a representative of the community in which I'm the rabbi, to be as transparent as I can be about the nature, not only the nature of my practice, my ritual practice, my halachic sort of prerogatives, but also why they are what they are. The beauty and tension of conservative Judaism is that it's neither a reform, sort of personal autonomy, whatever I want to do, I do, and that's all that matters, nor is it an orthodox, an orthoprax. You do what it says in the law code, and that's pretty much it, and you don't deviate from that. Because conservative Judaism itself is all about tradition and change, and sort of doing that delicate halachic dance. Everything is sort of on a continuum, on a spectrum. So to me, I've found the right blend of observance that resonates with me. So for example, I keep relatively strict kashrut, which is also somewhat easier for me because I'm a pescatarian, so I don't eat meat altogether, so that makes certain decisions easier. But I chose, at a certain point, to be open to eating out in non-kosher restaurants, to eating in people's homes who might not keep kosher, because to me it's important to show, to demonstrate that one can lead a life of kashrut, but also not have to be siloed off into sort of a self-protective cocoon of only ultra-observant Jewish life. So it's important to me as an individual, as a rabbi, to be out in public, and to show that one can do so without having to compromise or sacrifice one's sense of kashrut. Other people might hold very differently and decide they don't want that, but that's sort of where I come out. On Shabbat, by way of example, there are a lot of the focus of Shabbat often is on what's prohibited and what one can't do. And I prefer to try to teach my kids, my congregants, a bit more about what Shabbat can do, what it can offer. So, as one example, I've chosen to drive on Shabbat to and from services, but I've done so also because I've chosen to use an electric car to do so. And that matters to me because for those who want to go into the weeds a little bit, there's a big difference in terms of a combustion engine, the catalytic converter, and the idea of lighting a fire when driving a car in a traditional automobile, which raises certain questions about the impermissibility of lighting fires on Shabbat that don't arise when one's in an electric car. So I choose to drive on Shabbat to and from synagogue, but I do so through an electric car, and that distinction matters to me. Again, because to me it's important to find ways to celebrate Shabbat, to enjoy the opportunities that Shabbat affords, and not just see Shabbat as what one can't do. So I also like to teach about why I don't spend money on Shabbat, because I think that matters to me, not so much in terms of avoiding a negative prohibition as what Shabbat's all about. And so I like to explain that to me Shabbat is about a sense of satisfaction with what one has, and not the constant yearning for more, not the constant striving to create and generate more, which is so predominant in our culture, that Shabbat is a countercultural break from that. And so by not spending money on Shabbat, even though it's so simple as just clicking a few things on your phone, that creates a mindset of appreciation, of sufficiency. So to me, it's not so much about just what I choose to do or not do in the public eye. It's also making sure that I take opportunities to explain a little bit about why I do what I do, in the hopes that that might resonate with some others.
Thank you. There are some questions here about the our religious school. And this has been a topic that's been covered several times already, but I thought it would be helpful to raise it here as well. Can you share with us how you like to be, or don't like to be, involved in the religious school?
Sure. A few different things. So I have strong personal interest in being involved in the B'nai Mitzvah process, to the extent that it works with sort of the overall flow and mission of the B'nai Mitzvah program. The piece that I most enjoy working on, although I've done lots of different things, is working directly with the B'nai Mitzvah students on creating their Divrei Torah, their speeches, their sermons that they're going to give. The reason I love working with them in that capacity is that I find that it's an amazing opportunity for me to get to know these students in a little bit more depth about what their personal aspirations are, what their hobbies are, what their interests are, because I get them to unpack some of that, especially coming into a new environment where I haven't had the privilege of growing up with them, or watching them grow up and learn about them. It's a great opportunity for me to come in sort of come in a new way, but get to know them. And so what I do is work with them on sharing a bit about their background, their interests, their passions, and then helping them to figure out how they can weave that into their Divrei Torah as well, so that the community as a whole can get to know them a little bit. So that's something I really enjoy spending time on. In terms of the religious school as a whole, I'd say two things. One is that I find it quite impactful and helpful for me to be present at the door at the beginning and end of religious school, so that I can meet with parents when they come in, so that I can see them at drop-off, so that I can have conversations with them, check in with them, so the students have someone who, again, going back to this theme of welcoming, to embody that when the students come in, so they feel that sense of connection. I often find that I have surprising and really productive conversations with parents who might see me at the door and oh, I was meaning to bring this up to you, and you're right here, so can we chat for a minute? So it's a great opportunity to check in with parents, to make sure that they feel a sense of connection to the community as well as their children. So that's something that I enjoy doing. And then lastly, it's working with the religious school director to find out where I can be of added value. I don't want the first time I get to really interact with the students to be when they're bar mitzvah age. I want to find ways to connect with them earlier on, but to do so in a way that's helpful and productive to the school as a whole. So what that might mean, coming into the kindergarten and first grade classes periodically to read a story with them, or it could be finding a way to come into a third or fourth grade class to teach them about a particular prayer. I find sort of be a little bit of a free agent and find ways to come and go into different groups as needed to be a bit more effective than, say, focusing on second grade Hebrew class all year long. So I like to find different ways that I can connect with and different touch points for different groups by working with the religious school leadership to figure out how I can be helpful.
Thank you. Again, a question that you've answered several times over the last few days, but I think it's so important for the group to have a chance to hear, and thankfully it was in the cards a few times. What has attracted you to HNT? And that question obviously is multifaceted at this point, because what attracted you here a month or 2 or 3 ago is obviously very different, or is hopefully additive now, or added to by what you've learned in the last few days. So I'm sure the congregation would love to hear.
Sure. So I'd say a few factors. I think first and foremost, what attracted me was the curiosity I had from reading sort of the questionnaire and wondering how that would play out in real life, and that I've now had the chance to see, is the description of this being a warm, a Hamish, a welcoming community, a community that cares for one another. And I'm pleased to say that what was written down on the questionnaire has really been borne out by what I've learned from meeting so many of you. I'm especially struck by the intergenerational nature of this place, that people choose to affiliate. L'Ador Vador is really an incredible testament to the enduring ethos of this community as a place where people want to not only come, but come back to and raise their children here and have their grandchildren come here. So I think that speaks volumes about the character of Herzl. As I mentioned before, I'm originally from San Diego. I've been yearning to return to the West Coast for quite some time, and looking for the right opportunity, both in terms of sort of my rabbinic career, the timing of sort of where our family was at, and this happens to be the year that is ripe for us to make that kind of transition. So I was looking for an opportunity for a synagogue that is on the West Coast. And so when I read about Herzl-Ner Tamid, I thought, okay, that this still qualifies as the West Coast. I actually spent one summer when I was in law school working in Seattle, and had a fabulous time here. And so I've always sort of kept that in the recesses of my mind as this could be an interesting city to come live in at some point. But it's like that. There we go. A couple more things about the synagogue. I think it's a really exciting kind of inflection point in the life of the synagogue, with the Barnaby Project coming on board pretty soon, and what that means in terms of a reorientation of the centrality of Jewish life in Seattle being right here, and the opportunities that might afford. The opportunity for the synergies that having Jewish day school across the street, or not even across the street, across the, right there, whatever that is, and what that can afford, and having the Schechter camp also possibly headquartered right here, and what that might mean in terms of building out those relationships even fuller, although I understand a lot of members here go to the camp as well. So I think there's the excitement of thinking through and working with this community about what that sort of new vision might mean, with a new cantor already on board, and some other, I think, staffing decisions coming online, an opportunity to, again, envision what a new future might be. I think that's really exciting to me. To have that possibility is not something that one often encounters. So that's just a little bit about what interests me. I've also been really pleasantly surprised by the staff that I've met at the cantor, the religious school director, a whole host of the the staff that I met yesterday. So you have a really talented crew here, and I think that's really important for me to find in terms of the partnership that I'm looking for is to know that I would have colleagues who can do so much and can do great things with together.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you. There's this question that's been, it's long, but I'm going to shorten it just a little bit if that's, I hope that will be okay with the author. The rabbi role is very diverse, wide, deep, complex. This individual is asking about which elements of the role give you energy. And you don't have to address the flip side, which is what maybe might sap your energy. I think really people are interested in what part of the role, given the choice, you tend to gravitate towards.
Great. So I'd say there's two primary facets of being a rabbi that really animate me the most. The first is the opportunity to provide pastoral care to people who need it, whether in times of joy or in times of sorrow. It's really in my mind a unique gift of this job, this profession, this calling, that I get to spend time one-on-one with people and try to bring the spiritual resources of our tradition to bear to help them walk through sometimes some really challenging moments in their lives, or at the very least some really profound moments of their lives, and to be able to have those one-on-one conversations, whether it's a conversation in my office to discuss something, or whether it's being with them at a funeral service and holding them through that, or being with them at a simchat vat, at a baby naming, and finding ways to, again, be with people at such profound moments in their lives, and find ways to hopefully connect and bring a little bit more Judaism into their lives, to help them navigate that terrain is not something that many people get to do, and I really value that and treasure it, and it's something that is the reason why I chose, in large part, to return to the pulpit. I had taken a few years off to work in the Jewish nonprofit space before COVID, and then COVID hit, and I really, really missed that opportunity, and so that's something that animates me, and is why I've continued to want to remain in the pulpit. The second thing I would say is when I have an opportunity to teach or to just intellectually engage with others, whether that's a sermon, whether it's an adult ed class, what really speaks to me is the opportunity to transmit texts and literature that might be a bit opaque or not super accessible, and find ways to translate and transmit our tradition in a modern valence that makes what I find that the deep wisdom of our tradition come to life in modern and contemporary ways. I think that we have such deep repositories of wisdom and learning and knowledge that I see my role as someone who can help transmit and translate how that can be effective in a contemporary way, because I think so much Torah, and with a lowercase tough, both Torah and sort of the unfolding narrative of Jewish law and literature continues to be so germane to our lives today, and so to play a role in that transmission speaks a lot to me.
Thank you. A couple of questions about inclusivity. The The first one I think we've talked about several times, but not with this group. Can you talk about your perspective on gay marriage? I'll leave the question there.
Okay, sure. I relish the opportunity to bring two Jewish individuals together in marriage, and to be a part of the wedding ceremony for any two Jewish individuals who choose to make a lifelong commitment to be together. Oh, thanks. Wasn't expecting that. So to me, I don't see any distinction in terms of that desire, whether what the sexual orientation is of any of those, however those two come together. I think that it's important to celebrate the particular nature of any two individuals who come together in marriage in a way that's authentic to what that partnership looks like. The conservative movement has come up with a religious ceremony for same-sex weddings that speaks to some of those particularities, because the traditional marital ritual language doesn't really fit in a same-sex context, and so it's important to honor the integrity of what that relationship is with language that expresses it. I look to that kind of language as something that's helpful to effectuate and really make special that kind of a ceremony. But yeah, so I'll pause there.
Thank you. On the same theme of inclusivity, would love to hear any ideas or perspectives you have on helping adults and children with special needs feel included in our community.
That's a great question. Yeah, again, sort of going back to the orientation of being a welcoming spiritual home for all who seek it. I think it's important for us to be sensitive to blind spots we might have about how inclusive we actually are, and who might we be leaving out by not having a full sensitivity. So I think it's important to find out where there might be areas for improvement in terms of accessibility, and again, it's a whole range of accessibility. It can be those who might be hearing impaired. It might be for those who have ambulatory issues in terms of accessing our spiritual spaces, and are we doing enough to make that inclusive? And when it comes to special needs as well, I think just as one of many examples, I think when it comes to the B'nai Mitzvah curriculum, I think it's important that we have both general expectations and of a sort of a baseline of what we want our students to learn, and that we always try to add an individualized perspective of seeing each and every student in their totality, and realizing what they're able to accomplish, what they're not able to accomplish, what will give them a sense of achievement, and what are some of the skill sets that we want them to have for a lifetime of Jewish ritual engagement. And not assuming a cookie cutter sort of one size fits all approach is one way to embrace that. So at the synagogue I'm at now, we recently had a student who was just painfully shy and anxious about appearing in our ritual space in public with other people around. And so even though it wasn't our general preference, we elected to allow that individual to have a Havdalah, Mariv Mincha Mariv, Saturday afternoon, evening, Shabbat service that was just for them and their family, because we wanted that individual to have the opportunity to celebrate a bar mitzvah, but also knew that there was just no practical way we could do that in the course of a regular Shabbat morning experience and not have that child just be terrified. So that's one example of hopefully many, of how I think it's important that we be responsive to the needs of each and every individual while also being responsive to the needs of the community and trying to find the best way to make this as inclusive and welcoming a place as possible.
Thank you. So I know we're over time. If people need to leave, we understand. I was going to ask my last question, but Brad just handed me a question that I can't believe hadn't been in the deck up until this point, and I have to ask it. So there are two more questions. So I'm going to be a couple of minutes late. We've talked about engaging all sorts of groups, but we forgot to talk about engaging the older members of the shul. So I'd love.
They're wondering how are you quantifying older members?
Oh.
I'll let you answer that one.
I'm going to say anyone over 50. How's that? No. Whenever we talk about younger folks, everyone, I've read the cards. They all say 30s and 40s. I never heard anyone refer to people's in their 50s as part of the younger group. So I'm going to say anyone over 50. This question specifically refers to 55 to 70, but I'm interested in 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, God willing, hundreds.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us to think creatively about how we're ensuring both general religious, social, cultural, intellectual programming for the community as a whole, and also having some differentiated affinity group organized and targeted sort of micro-demographic programming for each group, because the needs and the desires for each are different and the opportunities are different. So I think for those who are of a certain age where they're retired, for example, then I think it's helpful to try to do a bit more programming that's during the daytime. So I like doing lunch and learn adult education classes for those who have the opportunity, because that gives a way for them to have some additional piece of what they're doing to fill in a portion of the daytime. The program that I came to earlier today, the monthly movie daytimers. Thank you. It's another great idea. There were quite a lot of people there who were interested in the Marijuana Doe movie. I'm not gonna cast any aspersions or even innuendos about what that's all about. But so I think it's important to realize that again, for those who are of a certain age, there's more opportunities to do daytime-oriented programming. For those who are perhaps younger, or those who are still working, it's important that we have opportunities in the evenings or on the weekends. So we have to be sensitive to when people are available and find ways to reach them in those different touch points. And again, the last thing I'll say is it's really important that we are asking the questions of what do those members want. I've taken the time to send out surveys or have phone calls, or just talk to people at Kiddush about what are you looking for that we're not yet seeing, and what that might look like, and then invite them to be the champions of those individual events and perhaps help take the lead in making them happen. So making sure that we're doing that due diligence to find out what the needs are, who might be interested in helping us satisfy them, and then making sure that we provide that.
Wonderful. And the I have to say the Daytimers event is applicable to anyone. I was there this afternoon. It was wonderful. Okay, so looking forward now, we'd love for you to imagine your first 3 months in this position. How would you spend your time, or how would you spend your time during those first 3 months? What would be your primary goals during that time, and what would you view as success at the end of those 3 months?
I think the primary way I would want to spend my time is trying to learn as much as possible and assume as little as possible about how things work here, what the interests are, what some of the sources of joy and pride and what has been are, and where are some of the challenges and growth areas that people are looking for, possibly for some change. I would not want to come in here in the first 3 months and start thinking that I had all the great ideas about what new things we need to do right away. That's not my sort of approach to community engagement. So I would want to listen and learn and meet with maybe some small groups, do some house meetings where I could meet different people in their homes, because I find that sometimes people are open and candid in a synagogue space, but sometimes they can be a little bit more reserved, and it's nice to meet people in their kitchens or living rooms and have those conversations. So I would want to learn as much as possible, listen as much as I can, and not take any sort of knee-jerk or initial responses or actions, but just get to know as many people as I can and get to learn as much as I can. And I think success would be when I can really start to encounter people at Kiddush and already know a little bit about them. When I can get to know the students in the religious school and have them get to know me a little bit. I think it's those initial strands of connection are what I'd be yearning for in terms of getting a sense of success initially, and then growing from there.
Thank you very, very much for spending this time. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you for staying here so late. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to remind you all again to please fill out the survey. There's one question at the end of the survey about the search process, and for many of you, we recognize that this meeting itself is a big part of your portal into the search process. The search committee and the synagogue, the leadership, is looking for feedback from all of you on the process as well. So please include that. Any comments you have about tonight, about how we've done leading up to this point, we're very, very interested in hearing all of that. Thank you so much for being here, and I wish you all a safe drive home.
Thank you all.
First one, I guess that's true. Yeah, that is. Depending on when I start, but yes, that would be right around the corner. That's true. I went to